Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are going to completely dismantle a really common, deeply ingrained misconception. When most of us hear the word propaganda, our brains immediately jump to dystopian futures, evil dictators, or, totally brainwashed masses. But the truth? It's actually far more complex, and frankly, it is a whole lot closer to home. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible forces that are actively shaping our society, our daily choices, and honestly, even our very thoughts. It's all about understanding the environment we interact with every single time we turn on a TV or open a social media app. Let's jump right into it and see what propaganda actually looks like today.
Here's our quick roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by rethinking what propaganda is, basically separating the myth from the reality. Then, we'll nail down a systematic definition. Next up, we'll explore the color spectrum of information, white, gray, and black. After that, we're going to build out your media literacy toolkit by looking at some specific techniques. And finally, we will tackle the democratic paradox.
All right, Section 1, Rethinking What Propaganda Is, Myth versus Reality.
We really need a massive paradigm shift here. I want you to ask yourself right now, what actually comes to mind when you hear that word? Are you picturing the dystopian fiction of George Orwell's 1984, where state power is just naked and brutal? Or maybe you're seeing old Soviet posters. Is it totalitarian regimes blasting lies over loudspeakers in a town square? Look, it is incredibly natural to think that way, because honestly, that's exactly how we're usually taught to view it in history class. But here's the catch. If we only look for propaganda in these really obvious, deceitful, brutal places, we entirely miss the invisible forces shaping our daily reality. We miss literally everything else happening right in front of us.
Media literacy expert Professor Renee Hobbs offers a totally shocking perspective on this. She states, propaganda is the air we breathe, an essential part of the democratic process. Just think about that for a second. That totally shatters the whole Orwellian myth, doesn't it? Propaganda actually encompasses everyday PR, commercial advertising, public health campaigns reminding you to wash your hands, and yep, even the election campaigns that allow us to choose our democratic leaders. It's not some weird anomaly. It's literally the water we swim in. It's the fundamental communication environment of our society.
Moving on to Section 2, a systematic definition, moving beyond persuasion.
Okay, this brings us to a formal definition from scholars Jowett and O'Donnell. Now, I know it's a bit dense, but it is absolutely crucial to really get this. They define it as the deliberate, systematic attempt to shape perceptions, manipulate cognitions, and direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. The absolute most vital words in that sentence are deliberate and intent. Propaganda is carefully, meticulously planned out, and at the end of the day, it serves the ideology and the specific intent of the sender. It's not inherently designed for the mutual benefit of the audience.
Let's unpack the three distinct mechanics of this definition. First up, shaping perceptions through language and images. A great example of this is the U.S. military campaign in Afghanistan. It was officially named Operation Enduring Freedom. Now, that phrase actively shapes a highly positive perception, right? It implies liberation and endless positivity. But when the word crusade was briefly used instead by officials, it caused massive, immediate backlash in the Muslim world. Why? Because crusade carries centuries of very specific historical baggage related to holy wars. Words matter immensely in shaping perception. Second is manipulating cognitions. This is reinforcing beliefs so you consistently think a certain way over a long period of time. And third, directing behavior. That's the ultimate goal, getting you to actually cast a vote, buy a specific product, or support a political cause.
Now you might be thinking, isn't that just persuasion? Well, there is actually a massive difference between persuasion and propaganda, and keeping them distinct is key to staying objective. Persuasion is fundamentally interactive. It's a two-way street, trying to satisfy the needs of both parties involved. It requires an actual dialogue. Propaganda, on the other hand, is a strict one-way mechanism. The propagandist doesn't necessarily have your best interests at heart. They just want to achieve a response that furthers their own specific goals, regardless of how it ultimately affects you.
Let's dive into Section 3. White, gray, and black. The color spectrum of information. A huge part of understanding modern propaganda is realizing it is not always a flat-out lie. It actually exists on a sort of color spectrum. At the top, we've got white propaganda. The source is clearly identified, and the information is generally accurate, but, and this is key, it's still carefully shaped to further an intent. A great historical example is John Ford's World War II documentary film, The Battle of Midway. It used real combat footage, but the intent was specifically to boost American morale. Then, in the middle, we have gray propaganda, where the source is deliberately hidden. A classic example of this is corporate astroturfing. Back in the 1920s, PR pioneer Edward Bernays was hired to sell more bacon. So what did he do? He didn't just put up a billboard. Instead, he secretly got thousands of doctors to officially recommend a hearty breakfast of bacon and eggs. The public thought they were getting objective medical advice, completely unaware it was a meat industry campaign. Sneaky, right? Finally, we have black propaganda, where the source is entirely concealed or falsely attributed, and it relies on outright lies and deceit.
Take a look at this image. This is a fascinating piece of history, a German parody of a British stamp from around 1944. Notice how by replacing the traditional crown with a Star of David and placing Stalin right alongside the British monarch, it creates this powerful, deceptive visual narrative. This right here is a textbook example of black propaganda. It's a total forgery designed entirely for psychological warfare. It was falsely attributed to the enemy, injected into circulation to spread disinformation, and specifically crafted to sow political and social discord among the Allied populations.
All right, Section 4. Recognizing the techniques, your media literacy toolkit.
So now that we know what propaganda really is, how do we actually spot it in the wild? Let's build up your media literacy toolkit by looking at some standard psychological techniques that you encounter literally every single day. First up, we have name calling. This is giving someone a bad label like tree hugger or a radical, so you immediately dismiss them without ever having to engage with their actual argument. Paired with that is the exact opposite, virtue words, or what they call glittering generalities. Think about labeling a product natural or a policy democratic. The goal is to make you automatically approve of it without demanding any real evidence. Next, consider transfer. That's using a deeply respected symbol, like a medical seal of approval or a national flag, to make a new, unrelated idea look totally acceptable. Then there's the classic testimonial, where a famous celebrity tells you to buy a product, conveniently bypassing your logical evaluation of the product itself. Finally, we have plain folks, which is when a highly trained politician rolls up their sleeves, grabs a beer, and claims most ordinary people agree with them. Oh, and of course, the bandwagon effect? That creates a false sense of urgency, making you feel like everyone else is already doing it, and you're going to miss out if you don't act right this second.
But here is where it gets incredibly sophisticated and kind of mind-blowing. It's the concept of rational propaganda. Scholar Jacques Ellul pointed out that as society becomes more scientifically and technologically advanced, propaganda actually starts to rely more on facts, statistics, and serious economic arguments rather than blatant lies. You might wonder why. Well, because the modern world is simply too complex for our brains to process directly. Another brilliant thinker, Walter Lippmann, explained that we actively rely on simplified pseudo-environments just to cope with cognitive overload. Think about your daily doom scrolling or how you consume the evening news. We are constantly bombarded with endless data. We actually seek out these prepackaged, rational-sounding, data-driven narratives because they help us make sense of a chaotic, overwhelming world.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the democratic paradox, control in a free society.
This quote from Jacques Ellul is a heavy one, and it requires some careful consideration. The democratic state, even if it does not want to, becomes a propagandist state because of the need to dispense information. This right here is the ultimate paradox. A free, democratic society absolutely needs what Ellul calls integration propaganda just to function smoothly. Governments have to run massive public health campaigns. They have to promote recycling. They have to channel and shape public opinion to maintain civic order. But the profound paradox is that this very need to continuously dispense official truth and to systematically control behavior for the public good constantly threatens the foundations of democratic freedom and our own individual critical thought.
So why does all of this work so effectively on us, even in societies that really value extreme individualism? Well, it comes down to the meaning crisis. In our modern, highly technological society, a lot of the traditional structures of meaning, like tight-knit local communities, generational extended families, or shared local traditions, have fundamentally weakened. We are increasingly an atomized society. People feel isolated and adrift in an impossibly complex, globalized world. And propaganda, it steps right in and fills that massive psychological void. It provides really comforting simplifications. It gives us clear heroes and clear villains. It offers a sense of shared values and a tribe to belong to. We willingly accept it because it provides this all-embracing view of the world that makes us feel secure and connected, even if we know that connection is entirely engineered.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. If propaganda truly is the air we breathe, if it's seamlessly woven into our advertising, our public health initiatives, our nightly news, and our political systems, In a world built entirely on propaganda, how free is your public opinion really? I want to encourage you to continuously question the water you swim in. Take a step back from the daily noise, look for the subtle techniques we discussed today, and always ask yourself whose intent is really being served. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.